This is an Audio Wool original.
This episode of Frightday is brought to you by Spring-Heeled Jack Coffee. You need great coffee. Jack delivers. Visit springheeledjack.coffee.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you'd like to support us, go to patreon.com/frightday.
All right, let's just rip this Band-Aid off and get it done with. Okay. Yep, here we go. Ready, set, go.
Fire emergency.
Please don't touch this. Listen. I'm sorry.
They found the bodies of at least 3 young boys, 6 more bodies under the John Gacy house.
One longtime acquaintance describes Dahmer as one weird dude.
Stay tuned for Byron's Serial Corner.
Friday, the 23rd of September, 1977, I was in the White City parking lot on Route 9 in Shrewsbury. It was probably between 9:30 and 10 p.m. I was going pretty slow through the parking lot. As I was driving out of the lot, I saw 2 boys, about 13 years old, walking up near the exit. I pulled up beside them and I stopped my car. I rolled down the passenger side window and flashed my police badge at the boy and ordered them into the car. One of the boys opened the passenger door and said, "What did we do?" He then asked me to give them a ride home. I told them that they shouldn't be out so late alone. I pulled out of the parking lot and asked the boys where they lived. They told me, and I headed in that direction. After we drove about 2 miles, one of the boys said, "You have to go down this way to get to my house. You're going past where you have to turn." I went around the bend and kept driving. The boys then started yelling something about, "Where are you taking us?" I pulled into an alley and reached into my blue police jacket and brought out a hunting knife. That shut them up pretty quick. I put the knife down beside me and told them to keep their mouths shut. I told them to lean over, and I put their hands behind their backs. I then cuffed them. Then they started whimpering or something like that. I went down the back roads and came out on Route 9, and then took a side road and kept driving around for about 2 hours. While I was driving, the boys were crying and asking stupid questions like, "Where are you taking us?" Stuff like that.
Why is that a stupid question?
I didn't give them any answers. I went down some more roads and came out on Route 290 and took them to Carlton. I pulled up to Bev's flea market behind a tent that I had put up 4 hours before. I opened the car door and helped the kids out of the car. They asked me if I'd take the handcuffs off. I told them I would, but I would kill the first one I caught if they ran. I wanted them to think each other's lives were dependent on the other. I made them sit down on the grass under the tent. There wasn't anyone around at that time of night, and it was a big field, so they couldn't run far without me seeing them, even if they did take off. But I weigh 375 pounds, so it would have been pretty difficult for me to catch them if they really started running. But they were pretty scared, so I wasn't too worried about them taking off. The bigger of the two started asking me, "When are we going home?" and annoying stuff like that. I told them in a little while or so, not really meaning it. Then I looked at one of them and said, "If you want to go home so bad, take your clothes off." They said no. We were under the tent for about 10 or 15 minutes. I don't really know for sure. The boys said they were cold. I said if they wanted to get warmer, then they'd have to get back in the car. They were told to stand up and put their hands behind their back, then handcuffed them and escorted them back to the car and put them in the back seat and put the heat on so they would be comfortable. We drove out onto Route 20 and back onto the road that led to the campground. That's when I decided that they could identify me and they would have to die. I stopped the car and made the bigger boy come out and the smaller boy remain in the car. I ordered him to remain put. I took the larger boy into the wooded area and immediately started to strangle him with my hands around his throat. I guess mainly because he could identify me, and I wanted to kill him. After a few minutes, he went limp, and I assumed he was dead. I went back and got the smaller boy out of the car and started strangling him and trying to break his neck with the crook of my arm. He went limp pretty quick. I opened the trunk and shoved him in. I went back into the woods and drug out the bigger boy and shoved him into the trunk also. It was hard work dragging the bigger boy out of the woods, pushing him over the top of the trunk. It got me out of breath. I closed the lid of the trunk and drove back onto Route 20. I was looking for a place to bury the boys when I looked in my rearview mirror and observed the Massachusetts Highway Patrol car that was following me. I kept on driving the speed limit and was looking for a place to turn around without arousing suspicion. Suddenly, the MHP officer turned on his lights, and I immediately pulled over without incident. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the other officer get out of the car with his sidearm drawn. He screamed, "Get out of the car with your hands up now." I did as I was ordered. When I opened the car door, I heard the boys screaming and kicking inside the lid of the truck. The officer came up running and shoved me pretty hard against the car and jerked my hands behind my back and handcuffed me. He then shoved me down on my knees and pushed my head into the gravel and told me not to move, which I did not. He reached in and turned my car off, took the keys, and opened the trunk. I thought the boys had been dead. If they were, the MHP officer would not have seen the trunk lid bouncing around and then used that as an excuse to pull me over. I wouldn't be completing this statement right now, and I would be free and not facing criminal charges. I want it on the record that the officer yelled and harshly pushed me into the gravel roadway, and that the boys really dented the trunk lid of my car.
Okay, is he fucking dead or is he not dead? Like, I'm actually not going to be able to listen to any more reporting on him until you tell me.
I think I should be compensated for the damage they caused. I cooperated fully with the MHP officer, and how he treated me was not called for.
Was not called for?
Uncalled for. So that was the confession of Nathaniel Bar-Jonah that was submitted.
Still questioning the first person choice.
That's a fun way to start.
No,
Welcome to it.
It is the fucking opposite of fun.
December 14th, 1977 was the day that was turned in.
Oh,
would you be shocked to discover that the recalling of events that were in that written statement submitted by Nathaniel Benjamin Levi Bar-Jonah on December 14th, 1977, as brutal and flippant as they sound, weren't entirely accurate?
Was it worse than what he said, or was it better than what he said?
If frustration porn is your thing, folks, this is going to be a fun month for you.
Oh, Jesus, fuck.
Bar-Jonah was given the maximum for his attack on the two boys, and I'll clarify what exactly happened to Billy and Alan at the end of this episode. But although the sentence was only 15 to 25 years...
If you end up fucking telling me at the end of this that they were actually dead, I'm going to fucking kill you.
This is where things could have and should have stopped if the criminal justice system, mental health professionals, and other social programs would have just done their fucking job.
No.
Instead of cutting corners and pushing this man down the road, eventually landing him a little less than a 3-hour drive away in the city of Great Falls, where he hunted school-aged boys throughout the 90s, boys the same age I was then.
I wonder?
Welcome to hell.
I'm not promising that I'm going to be here by the last episode. I'm not promising anything.
I think you can make it.
You told me that this episode was going to be the easiest for me.
I thought
it's
it was.
Not easy.
A while back, I sat down to select the next focus of my next big series. Though it took more of an emotional toll than I expected, I found it easier to really dig into the details when I covered our local serial killer, Wayne Nance, the Missoula Mauler. Great series. Go check it out. I could drive past his old house, his high school, eat where he ate, even visit his grave. A couple weeks ago, I actually got chills when I got a mailer talking about a warehouse closeout sale at a furniture store where he worked. Mm-hmm. So it was decided, another Montana monster. And even though there aren't a lot of them who have made the Big Sky Country their home, one name has haunted me for years. Nathaniel Bar-Jonah. Doing some cursory pre-research or pre-search, making sure I wasn't walking down an unexpectedly worn path, I found very little coverage. Some podcasts, short segments on Discovery ID style shows, YouTube videos, but they weren't much more than cursory wiki retellings. And I did quickly find out there was good reason for that. With no hesitation, I can tell you, Kelly, look at me in the face.
Nope.
Bar-Jonah is the most grating, disgusting, sickening person that I've ever read about.
Oh, fun. Okay, great. Great. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that with me, and thanks for sharing that with everyone else.
I've been forced to take numerous retreats from research due to the stomach-churning details of his perverted crimes, and even though Kelly has given me literally dozens of opportunities to pull the ripcord,
tried so hard,
allowing me to gracefully float somewhere less demoralizing, which would be anywhere else, to her disappointment, here we are for the next few weeks.
Joy.
She also asked me why. So I thought about it, and in typical Byron fashion, overthought about it a lot. honestly, to the point of paralysis.
Jesus Christ, Byron.
But eventually I read some words that helped guide me, and it was in the acknowledgments of John E. Espy's book, Eat the Evidence, the first of 3 books that I used as the main source for this series.
Well, that bodes well.
For many of you, this will be disturbing and difficult. However, it is important that we shine a disinfecting light on all monsters, not just the hunky Bundys and Lover's Lane co-ed killers.
I mean, I don't like that either.
This is the story of a serial pedophile. A convicted murderer, suspected serial killer, and cannibal.
Okay, so I'm going to push you. Why is it important that we shine a light on them?
So in Espy's words, he says, it is critical for parents and law enforcement to conceptualize how a pedophile lives and functions within their world.
Okay, that's fair. I'll take that.
And I would add that I think it's beneficial for all of us to understand that awfulness, all of this that are comfortable doing that, because there is going to be talk of grooming and violence towards children. And I'm not going to lie. Yeah, it is going to be uncomfortable. But I promise that I'm going to tell this story respectfully, not only to the victims, but considering you, the listeners, as well. And Kelly as well.
Okay.
I completely understand if this kind of content isn't for you. We'll continue to talk flicks and go behind the screams. I'm going to try extra hard to make the behind the screams episodes light and fun for Kelly's sake. We'll call them recovery sessions or something. I don't know. Whatever you want to talk about, we can talk about. But for now, let's go back to Bar-Jonah. Way back to the early morning of February 15th, 1957, inside the Fairlawn Hospital in Worcester, Massachusetts. Tyra Brown was in labor, her husband Philip by her side, and it hadn't been an easy pregnancy. 41 years old at the time, that isn't to be unexpected. In fact, early on, after experiencing bleeding and having expelled a zygotish-looking thing, she thought that she had suffered a miscarriage. But unlucky enough for us, after still feeling pregnant, like she had with her other children, weeks later, doctors determined that she was still with child. I mean, you've been pregnant a couple times. Mm-hmm. Is it a feeling?
Yeah, I mean, people describe it differently. I could feel it. I'm just thinking, sounds like a situation where she had twins and he killed the twin real early on.
Figure that out in just a second. A couple months later, she was rear-ended hard while at a red light. The accident was so bad that she had to spend the last 6 months of her pregnancy with a neck brace on.
How many children did she have?
She had 3. We'll talk about all of them. Having been initially told her fetus was fine, she became increasingly concerned due to its lack of movement around the end of the 5th month. Her doctor told her every baby was different, but he was fine. Now fully dilated and pushing hard, an 8-pound, 6-ounce baby boy named David Paul Brown got twisted up on his way out, but eventually came gasping and crying into this world. I said David. 27 years later, David changed his name to Nathaniel Bar-Jonah.
Why?
I imagine it was to hide his checkered past.
Such a weird fucking name to pick.
To avoid confusion, I'll be using Bar-Jonah throughout the series. My childhood best friend is named Nathan, so I don't want to ruin that.
Yeah, it's probably good.
Yeah. Also, the growing up portion of this episode is going to be a bit longer than the other killers I've covered. It's not often that I have such a detailed accounting of an upbringing, and in this case, it'll make sense why. At home, Tyra recalls Bar-Jonah developing normally for the most part, except one thing. He was always hungry, insatiable. And when he wasn't eating or crying to be fed, he was sleeping, which a lot more than her previous children. He would wake up hysterical. Nothing would soothe him except food. But like her doctor said, all children are different. Months later, when he began teething, Tyra would cry literal tears as Bar-Jonah would chew on her nipples as he nursed. When she would pull him away, he would only bite down harder.
Honestly, that isn't like crazy uncommon. I'm just saying like that.
With an appetite like that, baby Bar-Jonah quickly gained weight and became difficult to carry. And he didn't make it easier on Tyra either, arching his body backwards and tossing his head to one side every time she picked him up, seemingly more comfortable left to himself, except to be fed or changed, of course. Mostly inactive and continually insatiable, he grew beyond typical baby fat. Noticeably lacking muscle, his hands and feet appeared stubby, jutting out of rolls.
Okay, so how exaggerated is this? Like, are the pictures, does he really look that abnormal?
There will be baby pictures in the show.
I mean, I
notes
don't
of
want
this
to look at
episode.
them. I'm not going to investigate.
I forgot the book, so I can't show you all these great pictures.
Just tell me, does he look like...
He's a fat baby.
Yeah, but there are lots of fat babies.
This is a big baby.
Okay. I mean, I know a lot of big babies, and lots of times that's just an indication of very good health.
Well, not everything was big. Philip, his father, was disappointed with his son. The size of his penis and testicles in particular.
He's a fucking baby.
Well, he called them BB nuts. One thing that the author John E. Espy noted in baby photos of Bar-Jonah was his large, bulbous, swollen head, a characteristic of hydrocephaly.
Oh, like what we're supposed to believe crashed at Roswell. Gotcha.
Oh,
okay.
yeah. Which, for those that don't know, is an abnormal buildup of cerebral spinal fluid in the ventricles of the brain. Not a great thing to have, as the pressure can compress and damage the brain. At 6 months, Bar-Jonah came down with a fever upwards of 106 degrees, which is a scary thing for any parent to experience. I bet that's
that's brain damage. 106 is brain damage.
It's cooking, but I bet that's like a very helpless feeling as a parent when you're...
Well, I mean, it is, but you just go to the fucking hospital.
Which is what they did. They took him to the hospital, and there they bathed him in a steel tub of ice water, which eventually got things under control. There was no cause determined, but fevers like that are one of the main causes of infant and toddler brain damage. A few weeks later, post-fever, one of Bar-Jonah's blue eyes turned brown.
I had a friend who had 2 different colored eyes in college.
Did you know why, though?
He had cancer.
Oh. Whoa.
He didn't sweat on half of his body, and had like a... He's fine.
I might be able to explain that a little bit further here.
Okay.
It's not entirely bizarre. It can take a year for a baby's eye color to set, but having a different eye on each side is more rare. It's called heterochromia, which it affects 1 in every 200,000 people, and most of the time the condition is harmless. Actually, lots of famous people have it. Mila Kunis, Kate Bosworth,
I was just saying Bosworth. I was going to give you the Blue Crush reference.
You love Blue Crush so much.
I do. I'm going to actually watch it right now on silent while we're...
You can't do that.
Yeah, no, I will.
The waves coming in and out. Mm-hmm. Bill Pullman, David Bowie, Dan Aykroyd, Christopher Walken, Allison Hannigan, and even Alexander the Great.
Nobody knows if Alexander the Great actually had that.
Who knew? Yeah. Do you know about chimerism?
A little bit, very, very little. In fact, I've thought about doing an episode on it a couple of different times because it's kind of interesting.
It's a situation where a single being is composed of cells with more than one distinct genotype. So most times, in the case of a mother pregnant with twins who miscarries one, all of the genetic material is expelled. Most times.
I knew it. Fucking told you so.
Similar or synonymous to vanishing twins, sometimes the remaining tissue is absorbed by the other fetus. No one really knows the full impact of this absorption, especially with brain tissue, but it does possibly explain the heterochromia. And I'm no doctor or scientist. I'm just a simple podcast man. But maybe this explains his appetite, and his appetite for something specific. Like he ate his twin. 6 months later, the tantrums not only continued, they got worse. A photo of Tyra at this time shows a tiny woman in a floral dress, rhinestone glasses that accentuated her exhausted eyes. Typical to the times, she was the more understanding parent, while her husband, Philip, was a stern disciplinarian. In that same photo, he appeared hardened and detached, with aloof eyes. He was an aircraft mechanic for a bit, apparently took a lot of shit because he was 5'7" and could hardly reach some of the parts on the plane. I think he had a tough time at work.
Yeah, well, fuck him.
Well, yeah, I'll say fuck him. Eventually, he settled into a gig as a heavy equipment operator for a construction company. Bar-Jonah wasn't the only child. Like I mentioned, he had a sister and a brother, both older. And according to his older brother Bob, as soon as he could form sentences, he was lying. As soon as he could walk, he started stealing. He would fill his mouth with Bob's marbles, as many as he could fit, his cheeks bulging. And eventually, when caught, and this is just one of the lovely detailed accounts you'll find in John Espy's Bar-Jonah trilogy, check it out wherever you get books, he would lie as he muttered through the wet marbles rolling around in his mouth, "I didn't take them."
Nope.
It's kind of fun.
Nope, nothing about this is fun. Don't try to make this fun.
That might be the lightest moment in this whole thing.
Great, I'm excited now.
Bob was never interested in forming a real bond with his little brother. He was lazy, kept a messy room, and smelled, even for a child. His older sister, Lois, was more interactive. She would dress him up in girls' clothes, playing house, as if she was his mother. When she grew older, she couldn't come up with a single substantive conversation that they'd had. Unless he could get something out of it, it was always about himself all the time. When Bar-Jonah turned 5, the teeth rotting began. You'd think it would be the massive amounts of sugar that he was consuming that would have stripped his teeth of enamel, causing rapid abscessing, but it wasn't. A medication that Tyra had taken during her pregnancy was actually the culprit, and by the time he was 7, and his adult teeth started coming in, he had only half of his baby teeth left.
Awesome.
But that didn't keep him from indulging in his binges. His gums had become so calloused that several times the dentist had to lance his gums because his permanents couldn't do it on their own.
Cool.
Disgusting. While school-aged, Bar-Jonah experienced a couple foretelling traumas. The first being a dog attack, where he was knocked down by a boxer in his backyard. While on the ground, the dog, mouth foaming, tore at his hands and back until Philip was able to grab a shovel, hitting it in its head.
Awesome.
The dog wasn't brutally killed in front of Bar-Jonah. It ran away. Apparently it had attacked another group of neighborhood children the day prior, and when police finally caught up to it, it attacked the officer too. And before the officer could pull his sidearm, it ran off, which is kind of cool Cujo shit. Mm-hmm. But the damage was done. At the emergency room, they scrubbed his wounds, cut off torn skin, and sutured him up. As a precaution, he was given daily anti-rabies serum injections into his abdomen for 2 weeks. And for a boy who cried to get food, he never cried once during these injections.
So many chances for him to have died. This is really unfortunate.
Well, then the picking began. They would usually start small, like a sore or a cut, but he could never leave them alone. Soon he would...
I pick at scabs.
Soon the wound would escalate into a festering open sore. He would peel loose skin until it would bleed and suck the blood, commenting on how he liked the taste. And if he had a scab, he was going to eat it.
Okay, that's creepy, but I have seen little kids do that. I don't know
scabs,
that that's... Yeah,
but I mean, he took it to an extreme. Desperate, Tyra tried taping her son's fingers, and even cotton work gloves didn't stop him, of course, because he would just take them off.
God, these people are stupid. And
she would receive calls from school, teachers complaining that his sore picking was upsetting classmates. A doctor said that there was nothing medically to be done, that he was just a difficult boy with a nervous habit. And this habit actually followed him into adulthood. Following his final arrest, one of the guards at Montana State Prison complained about Bar-Jonah picking blemishes on his face, rolling the skin into balls, and throwing it into his mouth. He noted the intense pleasure on Bar-Jonah's face as he moved them around in his mouth, that it looked as if he was having sex.
Okay, I'm honestly gonna fucking puke.
This is where I've been for months. Late July 1964. Hey, it's late July now.
Awesome.
That's kind of nice. A neighbor girl named Mary came over to play. Bar-Jonah had just gotten a new board game for his birthday. Kelly, you like board games.
Stop trying to relate to me.
This one is called Ouija.
Oh, fuck you.
The two went in the basement. Bar-Jonah claimed that he could use the board to predict the future. And after a few minutes, while cleaning, Tyra heard some commotion. Rushing downstairs, she saw Mary. Her head looked like a cherry getting ready to pop. Bar-Jonah had his hands tightly wrapped around her throat,
Sweet.
shaking her head violently back and forth.
Good.
Tyra screamed for him to stop, and it took 7 shrieks before he loosened his grip. He then sat down on the floor and screamed back that he hadn't done anything wrong, that Mary had grabbed his hands and made him choke her.
Okay. And at this point, the mother said...
Later that night, Tyra did call Mary's mother to check on her. The mother said, quote, her son was sick and that if he was a dog, they'd have him put down. So these days, we have more resources to help with troubled children and their parents. Still not as many as I'd like, and they're still underutilized, but oftentimes Philip and Tyra would lie awake at night talking and trying to figure out how to fix Bar-Jonah. And although in hindsight it seems like a Band-Aid on a wet arm, Tyra decided that it's best that she tend to his every need, attaching herself to his hip to make his life as comfortable as possible to avoid his disappointments and reaction.
Oh, that's a really reasonable fucking conclusion to come to. Great parenting. Good job, humans.
The most gentle representation of the relationship that's been stuck in my head would be early Cartman and his mother from the hit animated program South Park. So anywhere he wanted to go, anything he wanted, most of the time, Tyra gave in.
Not good.
Candy, cakes, pies, cheesy poofs. I can't do a Cartman voice.
Oh my God.
If she didn't buy them, Bar-Jonah would steal them or throw multi-hour temper tantrums. And it's not like this family was poor. They had everything that they needed in their pantry. He just couldn't get enough. And Kelly, your daughters have an absolute favorite food, I'd imagine, right?
I mean, one of them does.
What would that be?
Oh, just sugar. Anything with sugar.
Anything candy.
Like serious sugar fiend.
Want to know what Bar-Jonah's was?
Sure.
It was apples. He loved apples. And he left the cores all over the house. And I like apples. It's one thing we have in common. Everyone likes a good apple. Most of the times, they would come home from the grocery store and Tyra would find apples in all of his pockets. They would get back in the car, walk up to the register, and Bar-Jonah would empty his pockets onto the conveyor belt, smile at the cashier, and say, I didn't put them in my pockets. I don't know how they got there. And since she took him everywhere, she also took him one time to Sears. This visit reminded me a lot of a story from Donald Glover's first stand-up special from 2012, Weirdo. Did you?
No, I don't know that I've ever actually listened to it.
It's a good one. I think it's still on Netflix. But when inside Sears, he split off from her the first chance he got. Minutes later, the intercom speaker pleaded,
Would Miss Brown come to the plumbing department immediately? Please.
Oh my God.
There she found Bar-Jonah sitting on a display toilet, pants down, aggressively emptying his bowels.
And how old was he?
7?
Okay.
Something like that.
Cool. Lots of fiber with the apples, I guess.
All right. When his gaze met his mother's, he grinned and asked her if she could get him some toilet paper. After cleaning him up in the ladies' room, she dragged him out, laughing, to the car, looking for a reason. All her son gave her was, I had to poop. Broken down by this we need to talk about Kevin-esque behavior, Philip and Tyra were at a loss. Then God came in.
You bet.
So they'd always been a church-going family.
Figures.
But desperate for help, a pastor at the Assembly of God Church recommended Bar-Jonah participate in youth groups and church activities.
Okay, so I will say that can be helpful.
Oh,
but
sure.
Like, that's helpful to overcome mild issues. If your kid has demonstrated, tried to kill a girl already.
Well, he made her head
we're
like
past.
a cherry.
I do know lots of friends who, youth groups did wonderful things for.
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that.
But that's kind of like deciding that you almost certainly have schizophrenia and you're going to cure it by
praying
or working out 3 times a week.
That could
to improve your serotonin. I guess it's endorphins. Yeah, but it's not going to cure your schizophrenia.
No.
So you probably need to be seeking some bigger help than just church groups.
God's pretty big, Kelly. And honestly, this was something that Bar-Jonah didn't push back on. In fact, he loved it, diving headfirst into scripture, arguing his interpretation of Bible stories with Sunday school teachers.
Oh, I bet that was fun.
I don't have much detail into that specific portion, but I imagine he gave them heck.
Wonderful. Glad you're using heck now.
Okay. Now we've come to the first red-lettered portion of this series.
That scared me to death.
A little girl on a scooter scared you?
Yeah, it did scare me.
Well, this will scare you more. Kelly has vehemently expressed that she doesn't want to participate in the more depraved portions of this report.
Because what we kicked off with was totally just reasonable and all right. Yeah.
This is going to be fun.
I don't know why you have any look of surprise on your face whatsoever.
And Kelly, I absolutely respect that. So in cases like this, what I'm going to do is I'll be recording the details alone in my studio, only giving her the Cliff Notes version, which is still going to make her mad at me. So if she's extra quiet or non-reactive to awfulness, it's not out of her lack of disgust. She's likely just not around.
Yeah, you can just rest assured I'm disgusted.
One day while playing in the woods along Lake Webster with his friend Kevin, the two were jumped by 8 older boys, all bigger. Bar-Jonah was shoved to the ground and was held down by the majority of youths, while the oldest boy took down his pants and orally sexually assaulted him. The remaining boys tore off Kevin's clothes and tied him in between 2 trees. They then poured gasoline on his naked body and lit him on fire. Bar-Jonah's pants were then also removed, and he was sodomized with sticks and eventually a broom handle. Looking up and seeing his friend struggling, he bit the penis of his attacker, broke free from below the bodies holding him, and beat them all to a pulp. Realizing that Bar-Jonah was strong and heroic, the gang scampered into the dense woods. He pulled out a pocket knife, cut down his friend, and used what he had learned in Eagle Scouts to clean his burns. Bonded by the horrific event, the two walked home, promising to never talk about what happened with anyone. Except, surely the aggressive attack would have landed them both in the ER. It didn't. When asked about the event, Tyra said bluntly, "It never happened. He made it up." Bar-Jonah was never an Eagle Scout, and his father would have never let him have a pocket knife. And it's unlikely that he would have had a friend like that, or any friends at all. Unsurprisingly, at an early age, he didn't get along with others. He wouldn't just threaten classmates. He went deeper. For example, one time, when a female classmate wouldn't do his math homework for him, he said he was going to break into her home at night and chop up her mom and dad and throw them in a lake. Confronted by the bus driver, Bar-Jonah said that she was just trying to get him into trouble. He showed the driver his already completed homework as proof, which is kind of proof of him just being sadistic. If he already had the homework complete, then why did he need to do that to her?
Yeah.
Now for some horror film talk, which I kind of disagree with Johnny Espy's characterization of horror and its influences on future serial killers. Of course, serial killers like horror movies, but just because
so do I.
Yeah, I was going to say just
correlation, not causation, is what you're trying to say, Byron.
Thank you. 1968, Freddie Francis released a supernatural horror film that would change Bar-Jonah's life forever. Dracula Has Risen from the Grave.
Who's ever heard of that movie?
I haven't. It's a film that Bar-Jonah loved so much that he claimed to have seen it over 100 times, which, still very unlikely because this guy's a liar. He did quote the Count Dracula character often. It was that or scripture, and sometimes he would mix the two.
Okay.
At 17, just staying with this horror stuff, Tobe Hooper released his masterpiece into the world, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Bar-Jonah went to every screening, and laughing hysterically at the violence, ushers would come up to him and tell him that he was making a scene, asking him to leave, and he would tell them to shut up and leave him alone. Even later in his life, his favorite film would be the 1993 biopic Alive, based on the survivors of a plane crash in the Andes who were pushed to make some pretty tough choices.
The cannibal.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember that being, I think, the first time I ever heard of cannibalism.
I loved that movie when I was a kid.
Never watched it, but was traumatized by the concept of it.
Speaking of remembering, do you remember your 12th birthday, Kelly?
No, I remember my 13th, but I don't remember my 12th.
Bar-Jonah remembered his 12th birthday. It had snowed heavily the night before, and he wanted to go sledding. Tyra said that he should wait until the storm settled down a bit, but Bar-Jonah didn't listen. He suited up and snuck out the side door into the falling snow. The driveway that he liked to sled on sloped down towards the garage door, although the slope caused water to pool, creating a bit of a frozen moat at the base. For some reason, before he waddled to the top of the slope, he opened the garage door about 1.5 feet, peeked inside, And not giving any shits, he shrugged and started up that small hill, forgetting to close the garage, leaving the sharp sheet metal edge exposed. Remember those traumas I was talking about earlier?
Mm-hmm.
Bar-Jonah crouched onto the sled and awkwardly pushed off, wobbling his way down, thinking he would have enough time to stop before the garage, or at least be able to stop himself by putting his feet up on the garage door. He did not. Hitting the frozen water at the bottom further launched him, his right thigh catching the corner of the open sheet metal door. The razor-sharp edge ripped a 10-inch piece of muscle off his leg. His father happened to walk up right as this all happened. Bleeding heavily onto the snow, Philip used his belt as a tourniquet and rushed his boy to the hospital.
Shouldn't have done that.
Should have just let him bleed out?
Yes, he should have.
Nurses and doctors were shocked by the injury, but even more by Bar-Jonah's curiosity and his lack of displaying physical pain. In fact, they had to partially restrain him. As the doctors tried to stitch up the leg, he kept sticking his fingers into the gash and pulling the muscle back out. One doctor commented in his medical notes that he wouldn't stop caressing his visible femur bone.
That doesn't even make sense.
That Bar-Jonah would be touching his own...
Like, the pain from that, how could he even?
Well, I think that's an ongoing theme in his life, is that he didn't feel a lot of physical pain.
Isn't there, like, an actual medical condition?
Mm-hmm. I didn't look into it, though. He thought the leg flap was pretty neat and was lying on the table loudly singing, "In the name of Jesus, all things are possible."
All right, great.
So he would spend 5 weeks there having skin grafts, going through physical therapy. It didn't take long for his caretakers to experience his character. They found him to be a spooky kid and would argue about who had to change his dressings, even complaining to supervisors for good reason. Bar-Jonah would ask nurses uncomfortable personal questions if they had kids, only expressing interest if they were little boys, younger than him. And if so, even at that age, if so, he would ask the nurses to bring their kids to visit him. And they would leave the room feeling ill. A nurse recalls feeling like he wasn't asking so much as he was ordering her. That he didn't really want a playmate, but he wanted someone else to feel pain, which at the time she felt a lot of guilt for feeling that way.
Oh no, shouldn't have felt guilty.
So when he was healthy enough to get into a wheelchair, he would roll from room to room asking about medical conditions and for patients to show him their scars. The nurses actually joked about having a "we survived" party when he was discharged. So time for some more red letter moments. Bar-Jonah, now 13, had a neighbor named Bobby. He was 6 years old and lived across the street. It was sledding season again, and the now recovered Bar-Jonah knocked on his door, seeing if he would join him at Cemetery Hill, which was the best sledding hill in the area. Bobby was excited that one of the older boys wanted him to hang out, and his mother bundled him up. Heavy lined pants, red checkered flannel shirt, and rubber boots. In my head, it was more like Ralphie's little brother in A Christmas Story, but...
No, don't do that to that.
Don't want to ruin that
No,
for
please
you.
don't. No.
And they were off, pulling sleds behind them in the direction of a cemetery covered with undisturbed powder and gravestones poking out. Using the excuse of having to urinate, Bar-Jonah headed into the woods. After waiting a while, Bobby followed, finding Bar-Jonah sitting on his sled. Without warning, when the boy was in reach, he pulled him down onto the ground, pinned him to the sled, unzipped his pants, and forcefully, orally, sexually assaulted Bobby. Crying, he tried to fill his mouth with snow to get rid of the foul taste. Bobby looked up, saw Bar-Jonah's scarred leg as he pulled up his pants, squatted down next to him, and told him to never tell anyone what happened, to wipe his face, and to stop crying. Over the course of the next few years...
Wait. What was the fallout from that? Did the kid's parents report it?
No, he told him that he'd never...
kill him if...
Yeah.
Okay.
Over the course of the next few years, this monster would continue escalating his deviant behavior. At 15, he stole his father's car, crashing it off the side of the road. This was around 1 a.m.
God, the number of times he should have died. It's absurd. It's
This was
almost enough
pathetic.
to
This-
make me
this
believe
was
in the
pathetic,
devil.
Though. He was just like hardly driving out slowly and like ran into a fence. It wasn't a real wreck. When his father arrived at the scene, he said, "Dad, look what someone did to the car. I heard them stealing the car and I took off chasing them down the street. They rammed the car into the fence. I screamed at them and they got afraid of me, jumped out of the car and took off running into the field. Do you want me to go after them?"
What a fucking psycho.
Years later, while in prison in 2001, you would have expected him to finally come clean. That's kind of the white lie that you make as a teenager, that eventually he'd be like, yeah, I took the car and I crashed because I didn't know how to drive. But instead, he added a detail that he was able to catch up with the people who stole the car because he was on the track team.
Let me guess, he was never on the track team.
Of course he wasn't on the track team. He said, I could run even though I had a weight problem. 1972. He started at Bay Path Vocational High School in Carleton, Massachusetts. He was 375 pounds, and, well, he sucked as a person. He was entitled, rude, odd. Visualize this. As he would walk down the hall, he would swing his arms, taking up as much space as possible, just making people uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. He did, however, get better at driving cars. One day, two neighborhood boys, Jimmy and Tommy, were riding bikes around. You know when you pin playing cards to the spokes of your wheel and it makes that noise? They were doing that, and that's fun.
Uh-huh.
When a fat older boy shouted from his car inquiring where they were going. They were headed to the cemetery to read headstones, and Bar-Jonah told them that he knew the ones with the best stuff written on them. Just then, Jimmy's mom could be heard calling for him, and the two pedaled off. Years later, Bar-Jonah admitted that he was going to kill them and bury them in the cemetery. Sweet. And something I took out of my original script that I'm going to add here, because I thought that maybe it would humanize Bar-Jonah a little bit, but I'm gonna say he deserved it. The Dupont Boys. There were 7 boys living in a home. They had a peach tree in their yard, and it would put out a lot of not-so-ripe peaches. And they would collect them, put them in their pockets, and whenever they saw Bar-Jonah, they would pelt him very hard with these fruit. And I think that that's sad, but it's a good example of bullying.
I think it's sad, and it never caused like his actual death. They should have done something a little more severe.
His fat back would be covered with these little black bruises. It's kind of fucked up. But honestly, if you're a shitty like that, sometimes you gotta be hit with fruit, right?
Well, I mean, you just needed to be killed.
My goodness. So the Dupont Boys one day
I don't feel like that's a controversial opinion.
Well, a lot of people don't believe in the death penalty, Kelly.
No, but if he would have died before he had a chance to do any more horrible things,
it would be good.
Would have been great.
But
would have been real good. I'm not talking about the death penalty. I'm talking about free market.
I'm not going to join in on your saying that I wish that someone was murdered.
I wish that Nathan Bar-Jonah would have been murdered before he got a chance to murder a bunch of people. Yes, I do.
I'll probably join you in on that, but
I very much
think
wish
it's a
so.
bigger conversation.
Oh, God.
Miss Dupont found 2 envelopes on her doorstep. The names of 2 of her younger sons were written on the front, and thinking it was an invitation to a birthday party or something, she handed them to her sons and walked away. Then she found them staring uncomfortably at the letters, so she asked if she could read them. It was one of those letters cut out of a magazine, glued to white paper note, and it read, "Meet me in the Bakers Grove Cemetery at 6 p.m. and something good will happen to you. I'll give you $20 apiece and don't tell your mother and father about it." Signed, Bar-Jonah. It's kind of odd that you would disguise it with the spooky cutout letters and then sign it still. Miss Dupont talked to Tyra, who came over and not only apologized for her son, but also for her appearance, because she had a dirty shirt because she was baking that day. Dupont told her to keep her son away, and Tyra didn't know that he had planned on choking them to death and chopping them up. That was his plan. Right. 17. What a wonderful age. Right, Kelly?
No, it was terrible, but go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I hated being 17.
Really?
Yeah, I hated it.
It was a tough year for Bar-Jonah as well. He was close to becoming a legal man, But that year, he became the man of the house when he came home from church to find Philip dead on the couch.
I mean, he sounded like a shitty person too, so whatever.
So Bar-Jonah immediately called the fire station. All the guys there knew him because he was a volunteer fireman, and they were there in minutes. Bar-Jonah helped the emergency crew put his father on the stretcher and load him into the back of the ambulance. He then began helping his distraught mother, taking her by the arm, putting her into the car. He drove 80 miles an hour to keep up with the ambulance, but it was no use. Philip was gone. Tyra, on the other hand, remembers things a bit differently. Home from church, she first heard her son screaming. Running to the living room, she found Philip on the floor. He was obviously dead because his head looked almost black. Bar-Jonah continued screaming hysterically, and a huge man going, "Oh!" It's pretty something.
Oh my God.
He tried to call the fire department, but she took the phone out of his hand due to the incoherent sentences in between screams. And the men at the firehouse did know her son. The chief had actually called her previously requesting that he stay away. Bar-Jonah did drive, but he almost crashed into the back of the ambulance that was carrying his dead father 7 times. And just like the firemen, the funeral director had to make a similar request of Tyra, as he wouldn't stop sneaking into the embalming room where he was looking inside of his dead father's mouth and holding his hand. He showed no emotion at the funeral. March 1975, things got even worse. And I'll be honest, I'm going to be brief with this one. This story was the first wall I hit in my research.
Ooh, wow, okay.
It turned my stomach for a good while. About a year and a half after his dad died, Bar-Jonah dropped his mother off at work. He wanted to take the car. There was a pep rally at school, and he wanted to show up early to show school spirit. Across town, an 8-year-old boy was walking to school. It was one of his first acts of independence when a white station wagon pulled aside. Convincing the boy that he was a police officer and that his mother was hurt, Bar-Jonah pulled the boy into his car. Hysterically crying, he buckled the boy in tight and sped off. A neighbor witnessed everything and quickly called the police. During this brief altercation, Bar-Jonah became frustrated after the boy refused to remove his clothes. With one hand, he choked and violently shook the boy's head so hard that he almost passed out. Bar-Jonah then grabbed the boy's genitals so tightly that he lost control of his bladder and bowels. Disgusted, Bar-Jonah wiped his hands on the boy's shirt, then attempted to strangle him again, causing the boy to vomit. Having pulled up behind, police, guns drawn, ordered Bar-Jonah out of the car. He rolled his windows down, stuck his hands out of the window, and yelled, "Don't hurt me. I didn't do anything. I'm getting out." He was tackled and handcuffed, continuing to express that he did nothing wrong. A female officer climbed into the car, convincing the boy that she was a real officer, and got him some help. The boy remained in the hospital for 2 days. He left with his face and neck still swollen, eyes pooled with blood. For everything, he was charged with felony kidnapping, assault and battery, and sexual assault of a minor. In typical fashion, he said, "You can't question me without my mother and lawyer being here." She showed up at about 2 p.m., and although the police pled with her that he needed to be committed somewhere, since he was a minor, Bar-Jonah was released into the custody of his mother. He told her that he didn't remember anything and must have, quote, blacked out, a condition that he was hospitalized for just a few weeks later on April 4th, 1975. The doctors were perplexed. He didn't remember the kidnapping or assault, but did remember the boy pooping and peeing in his mom's car, and that she was upset about that.
Cool. Okay.
He remained under treatment there for 18 days, 0 blackout episodes, and was released with a successful plea agreement and was placed on a year of supervised probation. He visited his probation officer 6 times that year. A couple years later, with summer in sight, Bar-Jonah again put on his blue policeman uniform and got into the white station wagon, pulling up next to a pixie-haired 9-year-old girl on her bike and told her that her mother was in a bad accident.
Wait, why are we with a girl all of a sudden?
Do you have a question about why it's a girl?
Yes, because I thought that was not the MO.
So she was 9, and she was also on a bike, and her hair was cut short. Okay. So he
probably thought
it was a little boy. Okay. But he told her that her mother was in a bad accident, and he said that he would take the girl to her mother, and she dropped her bike and hopped in. And we already know what happened next, because it happened before, except this time it was more violent. Right away, he started punching at the girl's face, attacking her so brutally that she lost control of her bladder, bowels, and stomach. It was so violent that she started convulsing. Frustrated, he pulled over and pushed the girl out of his car, leaving her lying on the sidewalk, crying through missing teeth. A witness quickly tended to the girl, who was taken to the hospital where she was treated and where she gave a brave, detailed description to police, who later that night arrested Bar-Jonah. This is just the beginning of the injustice in this story. His parole officer never heard about this assault.
How?
He again claimed to have no memory of what happened. The girl's mother refused to have her testify, and nothing happened. Bar-Jonah was released from probation in May of 1976. A note was placed in his file about how cooperative he had been. With high school in the rear view, it was time to tackle a trade. Bar-Jonah first tried furniture restoration, working at the O.F. Wanderers Company in Norristown, Massachusetts, but that didn't last long. When a worker tried to teach him how to apply varnish to furniture, he freaked the fuck out. Oftentimes, he would just leave, waving his arms wildly, saying they never gave him a chance to demonstrate his talents. One time, he got in the face of a female coworker, walking her back into a corner. One of the warehouse men grabbed him by the shoulder and shoved him against a stack of boxes, threatening to break his jaw. Bar-Jonah pushed over the boxes and stormed out like a little baby and never went back. Wow. Maybe he wasn't done learning yet? Remember how well Bar-Jonah took to Sunday school?
Really well.
He answered capital H his call in 1976, enrolling at the Valley Forge Christian College affiliated with the Assembly of God Ministries in Lake Green, Pennsylvania. And it was there that Bar-Jonah really let his freak flag fly. One day, he went to church services in blue jeans and a dirty white t-shirt. And he is not the Fonz, so he can't do that. The preacher took notice and said something during his sermon that it was disrespectful in the house of the Lord to look like he does. So again, visualize this 375-pound filthy man. He stands up loudly, left to his dorm, and returned in the same white shirt, lumbering down the aisle, swinging his arms. But something was different. He had used a thick black felt-tipped marker to draw a black and white spotted tie on the front of his shirt. The preacher looked at him and said nothing and continued. Bar-Jonah uses this as the example of when he knew that he was never going to take shit from anyone ever. After the service, though, the preacher did reach out to the dean, and Bar-Jonah was called into his office. This wasn't the first time that he had gotten in trouble at the school. For a while, he was a night watchman at a laboratory, but after cutting his head, bonking it on a scaffolding cart, he went to the dorms, you know, those shared bathrooms at the dorms?
Oh, yeah.
Covered in blood already, started trying to stitch up his forehead. A student walked in on him and quickly out and reported him to the dorm supervisor because that's like a pretty fucked up thing to do in a dorm.
Wow. I should have been actually writing a list this whole time of people who deserve to be punished.
Every person in this that could have stopped someone. Dude, it gets so much worse. They talked about his frightening other students, and he talked about his special relationship with God, that students were jealous of him, and they were all liars. Bar-Jonah's grades were poor at best, and if they were
Shocking.
better, it doesn't seem like they focused much on his school learning ever in this story. But
in fact, I find it weird that he went to college.
He wasn't good at anything else other than...
Yeah, but it doesn't sound like he was good at that either. So.
Throughout his life, you're going to see this theme of him feeling like he had this special relationship with God, and that made him morally better than everyone else, even though he was doing terrible things throughout. It's going to come up again and again. So I think he was drawn to that kind of higher education, even though here in a second you'll find out it didn't last very long. He was suspended. They bought him a ticket home, and security watched him as he packed up. Bar-Jonah claims that he left the college because the devil may have been on campus, and that no one understood his relationship with God.
Clearly.
Having moved back home and hitting somewhere around 390 pounds, Tyra was struggling to keep him fed. He was a, quote, eating machine. She told him to get a real job, but he only worked at a few fast food places, and only for a short time due to all the threats he made to coworkers.
Shocking.
Either he goes or I goes type situations, ultimatums to the managers. Which brings us close to where we started today. Saturday morning, September 24th, 1977, the day that would change Billy and Alan's lives forever. Bar-Jonah woke up hungry, more so than usual, so Tyra doubled his already massive meal in anticipation because she didn't want to get yelled at. He requested eggs and toast until he told her to stop.
She's number one on the list of fuck you right now.
Next week, you'll really dislike her.
No, I already do, though.
Then he asked to borrow the car, which is a green Plymouth Fury now. He was going to meet some friends. She knew he didn't have any friends. And honestly, we haven't really talked about this, but it's going to come up a lot in the series. I very much consider Tyra as much of a victim as I do an enabler. Time and time again, you'll hear her going to bat for her obviously broken son, instead of getting him real help, turning a blind eye, covering for him, and getting him out of bad situations. Or trying to.
I think we could just rephrase that as
She's
getting the world into a bad situation.
But she was treated so poorly by him as well. Like,
she created him.
Mother's love is supposed to be unconditional, you know?
You can still love your child and not want him to murder people.
Well, I don't think she wanted him to murder people.
Well, still withhold a moral obligation to keep them from murdering people.
I completely agree. I'm just saying that it's a very... You'll see it. It's hard.
Oh, my God.
Before leaving, Bar-Jonah went into his bedroom and wrapped a hunting knife that he had stolen from a neighbor's garage in a pair of boxer shorts. He placed it on top of a military duffel bag next to a piece of oily rope that he had found on the side of the road. He prepared his police shirt and fake badge and grabbed 2 pairs of handcuffs from his bottom drawer. They didn't have keys, and they were real. He packed the Plymouth and included a pop-up canopy that he had recently purchased for a new business. Next week, we're going to talk a lot about that business, but as a teaser, it has something to do with something little boys love. I can't see you. It got dark, Kelly. What's your face doing?
No, I'm...
Placing the wrapped knife under his seat, he left. Knowing he would be working late that night, he set up his tent early, his thick thighs whooshing together as he rushed to raise it in gray polyester pants. The bottom button of his police shirt was now missing, and his belly spilled out, creating an upside-down V. Yeah, let's get into it now. Why not? So Bar-Jonah was now trying his hand as an antique toy seller at a farmer's market.
Oh, my God.
Traveling place to place, setting up his tent. Borderline junk on shelves made of plywood and cinder blocks, but making sure to always have brightly colored balloons to attract kids. He spent a lot of time talking with interested little boys in particular, pulling them close, putting his arms around them. He loved that. He would crouch down and look at them right in the eye, ignoring the girls. And he advertised his babysitting services with flyers.
Amazing.
Unfortunately, Kelly, there's a lot more of that in this series. I'm so sorry.
Great.
This time, setting up the tent was a little different. It was the first time that he had set up the new canvas wall flaps that he had purchased, and he was struggling to do it on his own. An elderly woman walking by stopped to assist. When he noticed her arthritic hands, Bar-Jonah took them into his and said that he would pray for them to heal. The flaps were secured in place, and the old woman left, not knowing that she had helped in creating some concealed space for Bar-Jonah to use later that night. At 4 p.m., he was done setting up, so he left for work as a relief manager at the Natick store of Cumberland Farms. When his shift ended, Bar-Jonah bought cigarettes at a convenience store before making his way to the White City Theater in Shrewsbury. Around 9 p.m., Billy and Alan, both 13, in worn jean jackets and baggy jeans, walked out. I wish I knew what movie they were watching. That sounds like a Byron detail.
Oh my God.
Bar-Jonah started his car, pulled up, showed his badge, and asked, "What are your names?" They responded, and he told them to get in his undercover vehicle. As he was telling the boys how dangerous it was to be out that late at night, suddenly he punched Alan in the nose, causing it to bleed. Through tears, he asked why Bar-Jonah hit him. What did he do wrong? The driving continued for a while, the driver telling them to shut up. Then the car pulled over on a dirt road, and the hunting knife came out. The boys' arms were placed behind their backs, handcuffs clicked on. Then the duffel bag came out. Bar-Jonah ordered Billy to crawl inside, but even though he was the smaller of the two, he wasn't that small. He tried harder after Bar-Jonah threatened to cut off his legs and throw them out of the car window.
Jesus.
But still, it wasn't going to happen. The car started moving again, headed towards his tent at Bev's flea market. After parking behind it, the boys were yanked out and thrown into the tent. He used the oily rope to tie them to the frame. If you ever want to see your parents again, you'll take your clothes off. The boys sternly refused, were untied, and thrown back into the car, which was now headed down Old Cemetery Road, near the Assembly of God Royal Rangers campground. Bar-Jonah was furious. Nothing was going as planned. After pulling over again, Alan was pulled from the car by his hair, hands wrapped tightly around his neck, and his head violently shaken back and forth. He was backhanded by Bar-Jonah, falling to the ground. The attacker started kicking Alan in the ribs, flicking his cigarette ashes on him until he was out of breath. Bar-Jonah then squatted down atop Alan, resting his full weight on Alan's chest. All of the air left his body, and he blacked out. Believing the boy to be dead, Bar-Jonah returned for Billy, removing him from the car, strangling him as well. Coming to, Alan recalled Billy looking like a rag doll, his handcuffed wrists dangling together lifelessly. Bar-Jonah rearranged his trunk and placed Billy inside. The car started driving away, and Alan, thought dead by Bar-Jonah, was left in the silence, believing his best friend to be dead. After a bit, he found his footing and started making his way towards a building on the campground that had its lights on. A youth pastor was surprised to hear someone knocking on the door so late, even more surprised by what he saw on the other side. The youth pastor helped clean some wounds, listened to the frenzied retelling of events, and called the police. When the state trooper arrived, he was told the police officer had killed Billy and tried to do the same to him. An all-points bulletin was issued for the Green Plymouth. Police quickly caught up with Bar-Jonah, who had turned around realizing how stupid it was to leave the other boy behind. Identifying his car, Officer Stearns turned on his lights and sirens. Bar-Jonah floored the car, swerving down the narrow road, but the officers remained on his tail. On a turn, the Plymouth was forced into a thick bush. A gun was drawn, and the soaked with sweat Bar-Jonah was told to get out of the car. As the officer walked closer, he heard screaming in the trunk. Bar-Jonah rolled out of the car, a knee placed on his back, handcuffs on his wrists. When backup arrived, the trunk was opened, and the battered Billy was lifted out. So, a little different than what happened in Bar-Jonah's confession.
I wish they would have been aggressive.
But that's where we'll pick up next episode, talking the repercussions of this event, Bar-Jonah's first stint inside, the disgusting friends he makes there, and just how he ended up here in Montana.
Great.
If you like our show and want to help us make it even better, grab something spooky at shop.frightday.com. This whole month, I'm going to be pushing you towards the Byron Cereal Corner store. We've got replica execution celebration t-shirts, enamel pins with the faces of monsters, all kinds of stuff there. So shop.frightday.com. And if you like this series so far, share it with your true crime pals. I'd love to take this opportunity to introduce some new folks to our program, and, that would really mean a lot to me, because I'm putting a lot of work into this one. And if you're looking for more, join the Frightday Society at patreon.com/Frightday or cult.frightday.com. There we've got over 50 bonus episodes of Behind the Screams, which of course is the show behind the show. Byron Cereal Corner, there's more of that. Kelly's Cryptids and Conspiracies bonus episodes. Cinema Autopsy, The Writer's Room, so much more. Patreon.com/Frightday. Let's talk about this in our Facebook group, facebook.com/group/Frightday, or in the Discord server, discord.frightday.com. We're at Frightday on Twitter and Instagram. But until then, Kelly, where are you going to be?
Watching Blue Crush on repeat.
That sounds fun.
Oh, I will be at Kelly Frightday on Twitter. You can
Are you
email
okay?
me, Kelly@frightday.com.
And I'm at Byron McKoy on Twitter and Instagram. Byron@frightday.com is my email address. I'm very curious to know what you think if you do like this. Once again, share it with your friends. And until next Frightday, where we're going to be covering Netflix's Blood Red Sky, I'm Byron.
I'm Kelly.
Stay scared.
Super scared.
You've been listening to an Audio Wool original, produced by Byron McKoy. Theme music provided by Cemeteries. For more programs like this, visit audiowool.co.